Happy holidays once again, everybody, and Tony here with my tribute to Roc's second Christmas episode, Dear Landlord, which aired on Fox on December 20, 1992. This was once again directed by Stan Lavin, and it was written by Unity Boone and Karen Raper. After dealing with the much more serious and slightly more grave previous episode, Joey's First Fan, in which Joey witnesses Devon, his protege, being totally seduced by the world of drugs and fast money, yet somehow can't afford to get him back because he's already kind of a lost cause at that point. It's time to head into slightly lighter territory with Dear Landlord. Although, since this is still Roc, we the viewers still get to see that there are characters, mainly Roc and his family, who are still living somewhat in the breadline, but not totally under the breadline, given that they have to come up with a lot of situations in order for them to grow financially to still maintain the house, although they are not really of the upper class, but somewhat of the working class American family who still need to try to get by financially and would do anything in their power to ensure that they keep the house, especially considering that the holidays are about to be in full swing. But before the main conflict comes into play, Charles S. Dutton himself greets us, the audience, and dedicates this episode to fight cancer, given that Roc's acronym is Resistance Over Cancer. And at the back of his shirt is a cause to support for everybody watching at home, mainly for the Black American community, to become a registered bone marrow donor. And viewers at home also get to see Tria Campbell herself make a cameo appearance to also remind the audience that this episode is not only dedicated to her, but also the entirety of season 2. And with that said, Charles S. Dutton wishes us, the viewers, pleasant viewing, and the episode is introduced. Now, before I talk about the episode proper, a few words to say about some of the interwoven shots. I definitely love seeing those interspersed shots of a snowy Baltimore. There's a shot of one man shoveling some snow, and then there's also some shots of automobiles passing by a snowy road. And while God Rest Ye Merry Gentlemen is playing for the next scene, there's even a shot of a tractor shoveling some snow, some trucks traversing through a snowy road, and some cars covered in blankets upon blankets of snow. And since this is overtly a Christmas episode, there are also some songs being played throughout this, such as God Rest Ye Merry Gentlemen, and even some offstage carolers singing We Wish You a Merry Christmas and Deck the Halls. Now to the episode proper, it's obviously snowing in Baltimore, and Roc and his family are suffering from the intense cold because the heater needs to be repaired. Mr. Ellison, the repairman, promises Roc and his family that he will come back sometime on Monday to ensure that the heater is well repaired because it's going to be Christmas Eve. On top of that, their current landlord, Dawn, reminds them that he is about to sell the house along with all the property surrounding it to ensure that he too gets his fair share of financial capital. But he's also using part of that financial capital to take care of his ill mother, plus reminding Roc, Eleanor, and Pops that one of the potential buyers might be Andre Thompson, who is also considering their current house. Unfortunately, this news does not sit so well with Roc, because he himself continues to have such a huge beef, let alone copious amounts of contention against Andre Thompson, given his whole rap of being a drug dealer, as well as someone who is potentially crippling the community. On top of that, Roc's and his family's home, given their current living circumstances, doesn't seem to be too livable throughout the holidays. It also doesn't help matters that Roc ended up acquiring a broken down Christmas tree that he collected from his many expeditions as a garbage man and mounted it into the family living room as their Christmas tree for the holidays, which not only irritates Pops, but has somewhat irritated Eleanor to the point where she really wishes that Roc invested in an actual Christmas tree decked to the nines with wonderful decorations and not something that looks totally half-assed. And what makes it even funnier is that Roc is still defensive about keeping the Christmas tree because he still considers it a nice heirloom for the home and he feels like it is something precious, although Eleanor and Pops state otherwise, let alone think otherwise, because of how unappealing it looks. Joey has just returned from a hotel with his girlfriend Janice, but doesn't want to consider returning back home because he feels like he's going to be nagged by Roc about not getting a job, let alone paying his rent, and even doing his dues throughout the house. Furthermore, Joey considers being away from Roc as a fine privilege for him to continue on with producing music, let alone trying to construct his life as a musician. And even the banter between him and Pops was quite fun to watch, as Pops blames it on the government, considering his stance on Clinton, being kind of shaky with the housing, and thinking that he had one too many of Ronald Reagan's goodies, which I thought was a really hilarious line spouted by Carl Gordon in all of his dry, wry, and absolutely charming charisma as a fine stage actor and comedian. And his chemistry with Rocky Carroll as his stage son was totally palpable. Viewers get to have the impression that both Carl Gordon and Rocky Carroll, respectively as Pops and Joey, worked really well off of each other, and that is such a blast to witness. While Joey considers returning back to Roc and Eleanor and Pops as his last option, Roc ends up having an idea. He considers subletting the house to potential renters, thus seeing an increase from only having $12 in their bank to growing a considerable $29 a month if they sublet the house. And in one funny moment, when Roc is calculating how much that would be in a year, Eleanor dryly responds that that would equate $348 a year, with Roc exclaiming what Eleanor responded to him. And given today's economy, the house that Roc, Eleanor, Pops, and even Joey are living in, that's not gonna equate $348 a year, but way, way more. I'd argue that the house that Roc, Eleanor, Pops, and Joey are living in would basically be over $100,000, maybe even $50,000, but I'm pretty sure that it'd be a whole lot more than what they're trying to project by subletting this particular house to potential buyers. Although Roc believes that his plan will go into motion, Eleanor is not totally sure if it's going to be thoroughly committed because of what's going to happen with the maintenance, as well as which potential buyers might be particularly interested in their home. Nevertheless, Roc assures Eleanor that everything is under control, and he even hopes that once this plan is in full swing, the tenants will only have 5 minutes to shower, let alone consume the water. She hopes that time limit would be bent into her favor, as he utters that he and Eleanor can have 10 minutes of showering. And it's really delicious seeing Charles S. Dutton and Ella Joyce work it so effectively as Roc and Eleanor respectively. They not only had superb chemistry as great scene partners, but you could really believe that Roc and Eleanor were a married couple with a whole lot of intimacy as well as totally unconditional love for each other. The potential buyers do express interest in Roc's and Eleanor's house, with Mr. Ellison reminding them that the generator is still being repaired and is still busy throughout the holidays. One of their neighbors, Crazy George, makes an unwelcome appearance, much to Roc's and Eleanor's disgust, at seeing this total weirdo gracing their kitchen, and even yammering on about his grandmother watching WrestleMania to the point where he just doesn't want to be anywhere near her under the fear that he might end up getting a chokehold from her. And the bad news just keeps on growing, with Mr. Ellison reminding Roc, Eleanor, and even Crazy George that Crazy George's house also needs a lot of repair, considering that his heater is also damaged. This might mean a couple of possibilities for Crazy George: whether he resides with Roc and Eleanor, much to their annoyance and disgust, or go back to his grandmother, even though he doesn't want to. Thankfully for Roc and Eleanor, he doesn't appear in the next few scenes, but I also have to give major props to Jamie Foxx. He knew how to work exceedingly well with verbal and physical comedy. Verbal because he can commit to speaking rapidly and adds some interesting inflections to give Crazy George his verbal tics, as well as the things that make him tick and all of his quirks. And physical comedy because of the various movements that he produces. On top of that, Jamie Foxx was in total control of his body, thus making Crazy George steal the show in such a memorable way. Therefore, Jamie Foxx's presence in the show, let alone in this episode, was a thoroughly welcome one, and he knew how to play the annoying antics of Crazy George so amusingly, to the point where I was guffawing with laughter in the most positive way. Speaking of guest stars, Kadeem Hardison from A Different World fame also shows up in this episode as Reverend Adams. He greets Roc and his family with his trademark want for hospitality, kindness, and holiday cheer, given that he is a religious minister who also wants to make sure that he spreads the good word with his religious gobbledygook, coupled with a lot of sweet talking coming out of his mouth. He tries to sweet talk his way into Roc and his family into turning his home, as well as the living room, into a space where all the orphan children can come and play and communicate with each other, as well as have a lot of proactive and productive sessions with each other. But Roc is extremely hesitant about this prospect from Reverend Adams. Even Eleanor is quite hesitant about his presence, although he does try a bit too hard to come off as affable and charismatic to everybody at home. Even Pops Riley argues that if Reverend Adams were to come upstairs, he'd end up crying because of the stench that is present in his room, mostly from the sardines. Given Reverend Adams' sweet talking, he also tries to sweet talk Roc and Eleanor to donate some money to the church for the good of the orphan children. Meanwhile, Joey elects himself to do some repairing in the neighborhood, as well as from outside the house. And once Reverend Adams has collected some of the donations given by Roc and Eleanor, he bids them a good night and Merry Christmas. And Roc is just totally overwhelmed with all the maintenance that he has to do as a landlord, and realizes that this is so tough for him. And he just feels like he just can't really put up with all of these crazy characters popping in left and right. Eleanor and Pops also try to talk some sense into him by subletting a supervisor to also help him with all of the maintenance going on in their home. When Joey returns from a successful round of repairing, Roc immediately has an idea. He proposes to Joey that he should be the superintendent to help him maintain the house, as well as ensure that the financial capital acquired from this house will be in stable condition. But there are conditions that both brothers have to make. Joey proposes to Roc that he should not criticize him of his life choices and shouldn't go too hard on him whenever he is down on his luck. This is quite difficult for Roc, but he acquiesces and even reminds Joey that so long as he lives here, he is not to beg him for any more money. Both brothers agree with the conditions, and wouldn't you know it, there are some young Christmas carolers outside singing "We Wish You a Merry Christmas," much to the joy of Roc, Eleanor, Pops and Joey. And I also loved it when Joey just got into that Christmas spirit with such glee and joy in his face. But that glee and joy is somewhat worn off as Roc, Eleanor, Joey, and Pops have grown rather irritated at the children still caroling. Roc can no longer take it as he confronts the children to stop with their caroling politely as possible, but he ends up getting pelted with snowballs, which was absolutely hilarious, and he even calls out to an old lady who he thinks might be George's grandmother. And the episode ends wonderfully with Charles S. Dutton holding up a poster calling for the attention of bone marrow donors, as well as people who could help out with anybody suffering from bone marrow cancer to take action. And all the cast and crew playfully throw fake snow at each other, thus solidifying how much fun they still had with everybody, as well as treating each other like family. Dear Landlord was such a riot in the best possible way. I definitely loved the enjoyment I was able to acquire from this particular episode, from the guest stars such as Jamie Foxx as Crazy George, to Kadeem Hardison making such a charismatically charming appearance as Reverend Adams, to everything coming into play. You got Pops being so wry, sardonic, yet absolutely affably charming as a grandfather. And I have to tip my hat off to Carl Gordon for his amazing portrayal of Pops, and the plans that Roc and Eleanor concoct just to ensure that they gain a lot more financial capital to maintain their house is also quite relatable for anybody who wants to ensure financial stability to keep their house, and also quite fun for anybody who also wants to keep rooting for them to have their great happily ever after. And when Joey does return to be the unofficial superintendent of their place, then there were a lot of smiles all around, not just from Roc, Eleanor, and Pops, but from us, the audience, as well. This is highly recommended viewing if you are hankering for a fun Christmas episode full of laughs, interesting guest appearances, as well as a story that deals with some stakes going on to ensure that Roc's and Eleanor's house is in one piece. Therefore, I consider it one of the best episodes that Roc had to offer, let alone one of the best live-action Christmas episodes that I've seen on television. And for those of you who caught Dear Landlord from Roc, what'd you think of it? Did you feel that Kadeem Hardison and Jamie Foxx as Reverend Adams and Crazy George managed to bolster this entire episode? Did you really love this episode in its entirety? What was your favorite moment from Dear Landlord? Or did you feel like this particular Christmas episode was not to your liking? Please let me know in the comments below. Well, that's it for my tribute to Roc's second Christmas episode, Dear Landlord. Tune in later for my tribute to Frank's Place's Christmas episode, Season's Greetings. So until then, happy holidays, everybody!